Okay. Hey, everybody. Hey, y'all. I am so glad that you all are here. Can y'all see my screen? Am I doing that right? Okay. Thanks for the thumbs up. Well, everybody, I am so happy that you're here. I am Melissa Johnson with the Marshall Garden Company. And whether you are someone who has never planted a seed in your whole life, or if you're someone who's just trying to get some tips on how to make your fall garden better, you are in the right place because we are going to be talking about East Texas gardening. And I mean specifically what works right here where we live. We're not going to be focused in on stuff that works in Michigan or California or anywhere else. We're going to be right here at home. But first, I got a couple of housekeeping sort of things I wanted to be sure to share. So I am going to put in the chat the link to the materials for class so that you will have them. Hold on, let me make sure I do that right. Okay, that's working good, 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 good. But that link will take you to the slides for the class and our dig in workbook. Those are yours to keep and to use and to refer back to as you're building out your garden. Now, if somebody gets on the call late, y'all help me out and make sure to share that link with them if they ask for it. Which brings me to another point that's important. Um, if you've ever been into any of my classes, you know that I like for people to talk to each other. You don't have to be quiet in my class. I want y'all to use the chat to interact with each other, introduce yourself, share where you're from, tell the group what you're interested in growing this fall. And if somebody has a question, like we're talking about compost, and someone's like, hey, where do you buy your compost? I want you to answer that question if you got an answer. Help each other out because gardening is better when you have folks that you can talk to. And my hope is once we get the garden center open, that it'll go from, oh, we were on that class together to, oh, girl, we're picking out roses next to each other. Also, during the presentation, I'm going to be pretty focused on the content and trying to get us through all of this stuff in an hour, right? So I won't be able to focus in and answer every question in the chat. Now, I have set aside a whole 30 minutes to an hour after the class just to answer all the questions that folks may have, right? But while this presentation is going on, I'm going to be pretty focused on that, okay? Y'all got it? Now, see there, I'm already clicking wrong. Let me get this all back up. At the Marshall Garden Company, y'all, that's Todd. That's my hunka husband, and you will certainly see him at the garden center. He's the tree guy, he is the soil guy, he is the Mr. Fix It, and he is absolutely wonderful. If you haven't met him, you are going to love him. But our mission is pretty simple. It's about one thing: helping people grow as gardeners. When you come to our business, I don't want to just help you grow plants. I want you to grow in confidence. I want you to grow in your knowledge. And more than anything, I want everybody to have the joy that comes with stepping outside, stepping on your porch, and seeing these pretty things that you've helped bloom and you harvesting something that you grew yourself. I think that is one of the most beautiful things in the world. And we're going to do that one person, one plant, one porch at a time. That's why we're all here today. Now, I started gardening when I was a little girl with my grandmother. I was the expert at pulling weeds and moving bags of soil. I thought my grandmother was crazy because she would have us out there pulling those weeds. Years later, I get my first college apartment, and before you know it, I have built a patio garden that was so cute. I had these hot pink pots, and boy, it was pretty. Later, I built my first kitchen garden. Then Todd and I built another one. And then before you know it, I had started a company called Flu Baby's Garden, where the goal was to help friends and neighbors build and maintain their own kitchen gardens. And that was so much fun that, like, years later, Todd and I are opening this garden center. And we're coming home and opening this garden center. That's so special to me. Now, I do want to tell you guys that this class is just the beginning of all the stuff that's to come for the Marshall Garden Company. Our retail location, it'll be opening at the corner of Loop 390 and Fern Lake Cutoff in January, right? And I can't wait to meet all of you in person there. Now, between now and January, we're going to do trainings like these. I'm working to get a couple of more pop-up events scheduled around town so that you can come see us there. But also, I'll be teaching classes around town. I led a class at the Master Gardeners Group. I'm going to be leading a class next week for the Beekeepers Association. I've done some stuff with some church groups and some women's groups. And I am happy to come out and talk gardening to anybody that wants to talk it. So email me if that's something that your group needs, right? Now, the way to stay in touch and to know first about all of the things that we're going to be doing, I need you to, let me get this right. You have to go to marshallgardencompany.com and subscribe to our newsletter, The Garden Porch. We send out 2 to 3 emails a month, but that's the way to know what things we have going on. And one thing that you guys have to look forward to, we're already planning pre-opening events. And we're going to have a behind the scenes, see it first sort of event for folks like you, our nearest and dearest supporters who are getting behind us and participating and doing stuff early on. We want to be able to tell you guys thank you. So we're going to have some events specifically for you, but you got to be connected to that email list to get your invitation. So make sure you go to the website and sign up for our email list. A few more things. Todd and I have these 3 values before we jump into the content. And I like to share these because these 3 things, they really do make the difference between a gardener who is successful and one who gives up, right? Number 1, you've got to dig in. And that means you don't have to know everything to start. You just have to start. The second one is keep going, keep growing. Nobody is born with a green thumb. Every time someone says to me, Melissa, you must have a green thumb, I tell them, absolutely not. Your favorite gardeners have killed plants, but they became good gardeners because they kept going and they kept growing. And that's important for you to keep in mind as you start your garden. And the last one, well, worth the work, that is exactly what it says. Gardening takes effort, right? But it is worth the effort. That moment you get to stand on your porch or in your backyard and you get to see those beautiful things that you've been a part of growing. And that's a big part of why we're doing this and why we're here today. And I'd imagine that's why you're here today also. Okay, now let's right now, let's look at, this is what I call our kind of roadmap for the day. I'm calling it our sprout route. And this is what we're going to cover today, right? First, I'm going to answer the question that a lot of people wonder is, and that's, can you really garden in the fall? Now, the short answer, spoiler alert, is yes. Then we're going to talk about what it actually takes for you to get some big harvest. We're going to talk about prepping and the care side of things. Third, we're going to talk about raised beds and if they're worth the hype. And then fourth, we're going to go crop by crop and review what you should plant and why. And so we got a lot of ground to cover. Y'all, let's dig in. I see y'all in the chat talking with each other, and that really, really makes me feel good. Uh-oh, you see that clicking going wrong? Y'all forgive me for that. So, everything I'm going to teach you today comes back to these 3 things, right? When something goes wrong in your garden, and something will go wrong in your gardening because that's just the nature of gardening, it almost always comes back to one of these, 1 or 2 or all 3 of these things, actually. The first one is setup and design. That's where you plant and how you build your space. The next one is timing and seasons, right? To have success in the garden, you've got to understand our specific climate and how to plant and how to get your timing to work alongside our climate. And then the last one is habit and consistency. You've got to show up in the garden regularly to be successful, not just when you feel like it. Now, when you get all three of those things working together, well, that's when you get your greatest garden, right? Uh-oh. So if I can teach you one thing, this is the most important thing to help you have success in an East Texas garden, right? A lot of places in the country, they just have two gardening seasons. They garden in the spring and they garden a little bit in the fall. Well, here we have four distinct growing periods. Right now, we're in the hot season, right? But hot for gardening is anytime the temperatures are regularly over 85 degrees, right? And gosh, when it's over 85 degrees, your plants, they're gonna need a shade cloth and they're gonna need some TLC, right? We also have the warm season. That includes like late March, April, May, September, and October are still considered warm for us in East Texas. And then we have the cool season. That's early March and then October, November, December. That's when it's getting cool. And that's when you can grow the brassicas. Brassicas are like cabbage, broccoli, cauliflower. You can grow greens, you can grow kale, you can grow lettuces, and those things really thrive in the cool season. And then lastly, I don't want to forget, we got the cold season. And the cold season is January to February. Most of your plants are resting then, right? And the two important dates for new gardeners, you've got to understand that your first frost, right? And that usually comes in early November. And then your last frost, and that's in mid to late March. You want to remember that, write that down, because as you work out your rhythm for your gardening and everything we talk about, it's going to revolve around that first frost and that last frost. All of our seasons, they revolve around those days, right? So what's the dirt on fall, right? Now, if you look at this chart for a second, it tells you the whole story, right? You can see the temperatures in Marshall, they peak around July and August. We know that because we live here, right? But once you get to September, those temperatures start coming down. And that's when your fall garden will start bursting. But if you want to have a productive fall garden that's ready to start bursting in September, well, there's some things that you have to do before we get to September, right? Or if you don't do them early, before you know it, September will be November and you'll be at the frost date, right? Okay, so on this chart in the spring, I'm acting like y'all can see me pointing at the chart in school. But in the spring, temperatures rise, right? And for a lot of plants, they'll get started in the spring and they'll be trucking along really good. But as the temperatures rise, it stresses plants out. And one thing we all know here in Marshall, the temperatures go from really, really pleasant to really, really hot fast. And that gets stressful on your plants. Now, on the flip side, in the fall, temperatures fall. So when it's warm in August, right, you can sprout a whole lot of seeds. And then by the time you get to September, the temperature's cooling off and plants love that so that they can grow. So the bottom line of this chart is that fall is a really, really good time to grow vegetables in East Texas. The struggle is we just have never really been told that, right? And here's why. Here's the thing. Gardening is local. And I mean, it's so local that it's like zip code local. And the industry, like the gardening industry and the horticulture industry, is getting way better about teaching that way. But a lot of gardening advice that you find online, a lot of the marketing, like the plant labels that you see, a lot of that is based on what my horticulture professor calls the Zone 6 Mafia. And that was her funny way of sharing that a lot of the gardening, marketing, and your labels, they are built around like the central US, like think Kansas, Missouri, Illinois, Southern Michigan, all of that makes up Zone 6. And a lot of those tags you read, it's based on that area because that's a broad and general way to talk about gardening in our country. Now that's a problem because if I'm sitting here in East Texas, how they garden in Southern Michigan is not going to really work for me. Here recently, I had a friend comment on one of my reels. I had posted about like getting ready to pull my cucumber plants out because once the temperatures get above 95 degrees, plants stop, pollination kind of stops, right? So if you can get your plant to survive, it might have some flowers on it, but that flower isn't going to turn into a cucumber. So I'm at the point where I'm about to pull all that stuff out. And she commented that, oh my gosh, you're pulling them out. My cucumbers are just starting to fruit. Well, that's because she lives in Michigan. So where I'm wrapping up cucumbers, she's just getting going. She can't follow my timing and I can't follow her timing because gardening is local. And what works for your neighbor 2 or 3 or 4 states over, it might be good advice, but it might not work at the same time of the year for you. And that's what we're going to be talking about here today so that you can have some success in your garden. Now, great gardens here in Marshall, in East Texas, they don't happen by accident. There are three kind of non-negotiables that I teach people to follow when it comes to gardening. Number one is you've got to start with your soil and then you're going to mulch it like you mean it. You are going to get the highest quality soil that you can afford because soil is the foundation. Compost is a part of that foundation, and then the mulch is going to help protect that foundation. If you get the soil part right, everything else will be easier for you. I always tell people you get the best quality soil that you can afford. Number two, and I'm going to camp out at number two for a minute. Give me my soapbox. But I want you to fertilize regularly because that's a game changer. If you get fertilizing right, meaning you consistently feed your plants, you'll knock your own socks off, right? Just like I want a consistent meal, my plants want to be fed consistently. If you just fertilize every now and then, you're not going to have the success or the production that you want. You're going to build a schedule of fertilizer. And then the third one is the right plants at the right time. Now, fall is absolutely a great time to plant for East Texas. And I'm going to help you and I'm going to give you a guide to help you pick the right plants. Look, in the chat, I see we got some aha moments that have happened, and y'all hold on to that feeling, right? Hold on to that because it's about to get even better. Shout out to the aha moment. I got another Oprah fan. The right plants at the right time. How? So I've spent I've spent a lot of time building out these field notes, these guides specifically to help East Texas gardeners. And in your class materials, or you can go to that link on this slide, there is what I call the East Texas Garden Plan. And I have broken down month by month what to plant and how to plant it. That will simplify a lot of this for those of you who are new gardeners or if you've been struggling. The biggest mistake I see people make, it's not what to plant, right? We know we want broccoli in the fall. You know you want carrots in the fall. The issue, the mistake that folks end up making is the timing. Now, because we have heat that lingers well into September, you can get a lot of seeds started because seeds like to start with some warmth. You can start those seeds directly outside. And then as the temperatures start to cool down in October and November, you can have great production and do a whole lot of harvesting. So if you haven't already printed this guide out, I want you to print this one out. Stick it to your refrigerator, put it in your garage or wherever you're going to be keeping your seeds and planting. Keep you a copy of this because you're going to refer to it all the time. And if you can't get a hold of a printer, send me an email or shoot me a DM, shoot me a message on Facebook, and I will mail you a copy of this because it's really, really helpful to new gardeners in getting your garden going. It's knowing where to plant and when to do it. So up next, I'm going to talk through my checklist for my fall garden. And I want to pause for a second and give you some time to take it in because my fall garden, well, it started in May. In the heat of May, I'm already thinking about fall. By the middle of May, I was starting tomato seeds to have them ready for fall. So remember earlier, I told you timing is a big part of this. I'm starting tomatoes in May because I want to have them ready to go back in the ground so that I can harvest again through the fall, right? By early July, right, in the next couple of weeks, I'm going to start direct sowing okra seeds, right? I'm also going to harden off my tomato plants so that I can get ready to get those transplants in the ground. The other thing I'm doing in July that I love, that I hope some of you put on your list and that you send me pictures of, but I'm going to be direct sowing winter squash and small pumpkins. People think you're crazy, but you can grow pumpkins, the small ones, the cute ones. You can grow those cute pumpkins. And I got some tips on how to do that. That's right. Once I'm looking at the chat, y'all, and y'all are cracking me up. But you grow those small pumpkins off the side of your raised bed, and you will be in for a show. Pumpkins take like almost 100 days to be ready, right? So we were talking about timing. You got to get those seeds in the ground by mid-July because July to August to September to October, that gets you to about 90 to 100 days, right? You want to have them ready to, you want to have the pumpkin, the fruit on there before you get to the first frost, right? So to make that happen, you got to plant it in July so that you can have pumpkins by Halloween. In late July, I'm going to start sowing my cucumbers again. And I always plant some sunflower seeds because I like to have the cut flowers. I like to have the cut flowers in the fall. And then I'm going to put in some more zucchini and squash. And then once we get to August, I am going to start broccoli seeds and cauliflower seeds indoors so that they're ready for me to plant outside in September. But if I don't start the seeds in August, then I can't plant them in September, right? And I get it, like I get that this feels backwards for some of you, right? And it feels backwards because but in East Texas, you've got to work ahead, right? And so in the middle of the summer, you're thinking about the fall because you're building the rhythm of your garden. And I'll tell you, this is real life for me. Next week, I will be out in my garden, pulling out those old cucumber plants, pulling out those old tomato plants. I'm going to record it and make me an Instagram reel just so I can prove to you that it's really important for you to have that rhythm. If I don't pull those older cucumber and tomato plants out, they're getting sick because it's getting so hot. Those plants are getting sick, but they'll be sucking the nutrients out of my soil because they're trying to work even though it's too hot for pollination even work. So I'm going to take those out of their misery and make space for the next thing, right? I want you to use your workbook and all those notes that are in that workbook to help you build your checklist. But mine is a good one for you to start from, specifically if like these are some of the plants that you want to grow for the fall. Once we get to mid-August, right? This is when I really feel like my fall garden is kicking in. Because by the time we get to mid-August, I'm going to be direct sowing kale. I love to grow kale. Swiss chard, which is so pretty. And you end up having a whole lot of success with your seed starting in mid-August, late August, early September, because it's still warm enough outside that things sprout for you pretty good. By early September, I'm sowing beet seeds and carrots and peas. And then come mid-September, I'm going to be putting in another round of lettuce. And I put a note on here to talk about succession planting because you're going to want to use this concept. And succession planting, it sounds sounds fancy, but it's a really common sense sort of thing. It just means succession planting just means that instead of planting all of your lettuce at one time, you're going to stagger your plantings by a week or so that everything isn't ready to harvest at one time. And I'll tell you, like Todd and I, we have learned this lesson the hard way. When we first built our kitchen garden, we planted all of our cabbage seedlings at the same time. Every single one of them we planted. And come harvest time, every single one of them was ready. I had planted 12 cabbages. And so here we are. It's only the two of us, and we got 12 cabbage plants. Now, we like to eat and we love our vegetables, but we're not going to be able to eat 12 cabbages at the same time. If we would have just waited a week between when we planted them, like if we'd have spaced them out a little bit, we would have had a steady harvest instead of having a whole avalanche of cabbage. So consider succession planting when you're planting things like lettuce or greens or things that you want to continuously be able to harvest. What you'll do is you'll plant a short row of that crop, and then you'll wait a week and you'll plant another short crop. And then you'll thank yourself because you won't have a million cabbages and don't know what to do with them all. But back to the checklist. Y'all keep me on time. Come mid-September, I'm going to transplant those broccoli and cabbage. Uh-oh, the screen went crazy. Mid-September, I'm going to transplant that broccoli and cabbage and cauliflower. And then come October, mid to late October, early November, I'm planting garlic cloves. And that's my checklist for my fall garden, right? And this is what I'm actually doing in my garden. You're going to use your workbook to figure out exactly what you want to do. But before you buy anything, and before you put a single seed in the ground, you got to do a little bit of preparation. And the first thing you got to do is plan. So use your guide and use that calendar that tells you what to plant when to make some decisions on what you want to plant. And then you build your shopping list. A few of the other things that you're going to have to do to prepare your garden. If you already have a kitchen garden, it is very important that you remove any old plants, any plant debris, any weeds out of your garden, because you don't want those old plants keeping pests and carrying diseases that you bring into your new plants. The other thing that I want you to do, if you're planting a new garden, we're going to talk about adding compost. But if you're adding to your old garden, be sure to top it off with some compost. Compost is king. Another thing that is going to be really important for you to do, you're going to have to figure out your watering system before you ever get started. Now, I love drip irrigation, but that's a commitment a lot of the times for new gardeners, and ain't nothing wrong with a water hose. But before you put your garden into place, you've got to make sure you've thought about that, because what you don't want to do is to put your garden in a place where you've got to be carrying buckets of water back and forth to take care of your garden. You're going to want to make some of that easier on yourself so that you can have some success. And then the last thing that you want to do to prepare is that you've got to make a commitment to fertilize consistently. You're going to have to fertilize on schedule like clockwork, because your plants get used to that food. And just like you need the routine, well, they want the routine of fertilizers so that they can fruit and so that you can get that big old head of broccoli. Use your workbook. Like I said, go to that link, print that off, or read over it, because it gives you a lot of guidance on how to be prepared for your garden. Up next, I have a sample supply list. And this is a real list that I have used with people before. And it's not terribly overwhelming for new gardeners. And it's also not a reason to go spend a gazillion dollars in the garden center. Todd might get me for saying that. Because we need a gazillion dollars, but I want you to spend your money wisely on your garden. For new gardeners, I always suggest an 8x4 raised bed setup. At the most, do two. I don't want you to overwhelm yourself when you first get going and you got 6 or 7 or 8 raised beds. Go with one or two, and the size you're going to want to go with is an 8x4, right? There are a whole lot of materials that you can build your raised bed out of. You can go online and you can find some that cost thousands of dollars, and then you can find some that cost 40 and 50 and $60, right? I lean towards one that functions and not a whole lot of cost, because the pretty of a garden is the plants to me. But what matters more than the materials your raised bed is made out of is what you're putting in it, which brings me to an important thing: your soil, right? You're going to want to buy the best quality soil and compost that you can afford, right? I always tell people, focus your money on your soil, because a lot of other things will be forgiving to you. And here's the truth that I wish somebody would have told me when I was first getting going. I sat in a class with Dr. Macinda from Texas AgriLife. And he said this, and it was like a light bulb. I had my aha moment. But he said that you can grow an inexpensive plant and it'll absolutely turn around. A little sick, inexpensive plant, it'll turn around if you plant it in good soil. It will start to thrive. But you can take an expensive plant. You can go buy a $20 tomato and it will fail if you put it in poor quality soil. So I'm going to encourage you all to start with the best quality soil that you can. And I see in the chat, somebody's talking about the brands they like. Y'all keep doing that. I also love Vital Earth. Vital Earth works really, really well. But you pick the best quality that you can, and then you add compost to that soil. And we're gonna talk more about that in these slides, and then in the Q&A, I will be sure to answer those questions. A few of the other things that you're gonna need, of course, you're gonna need some basic tools. You're gonna need a watering can and a trowel. Two things that I want to make sure the new gardeners don't lose sight of. You're gonna want a starter fertilizer that's labeled starter or transplant on the packaging. Those are fertilizers that you add right when you put your plants in the ground, right? Another one that you're going to want to have is that I want you to pick out a water soluble fertilizer. And I always tell new gardeners to get a water soluble fertilizer, because you're going to want to regularly feed your plants. I fertilize my garden every week, and that's why I harvest so much. A few other things on this list that I want to make note of: mulch, right? Mulch is a lifesaver. Y'all, it is hot outside. We're gonna be starting seeds and doing all kinds of stuff. You're gonna be transplanting plants, and in September it's still warm. And mulch helps your plant, the roots of your plant keep the moisture. But one of the things I want to share is that I do not want you to use that dyed mulch in your food garden, right? You can use it to line your walkways and to make your vegetable garden pretty, but I don't want you to put that dyed mulch on your food. And I like to point that out, because I was in Walmart and they got that dyed mulch on sale for $2. I don't know how they sell it for $2. I can't even buy it wholesale for $2, but that's neither here nor there. Don't use that on your vegetables. You can use it for the walkways, but don't use it for your vegetables. For your vegetables, I want you to use a hardwood mulch. Shredded hardwood is best, but you can also use pine needles. Use things that are a little bit more natural, because you're growing food that you're going to eat, right? And then a couple more that I want to make note of. Be sure to get plant labels, or to have some system to label your plants and your seeds, right? I'm serious. I see in the comments the amen crew. Plant labels are for real. I promise you, you are not going to remember everything you plant. And the tough part is in your fall garden, cabbage looks just like broccoli, and broccoli looks just like cauliflower. Those seedlings look just alike all the way until they start giving you fruiting. So I want you to label every time you start seeds, label it. When you put plants in the ground, make sure you label it every single time. And then the other things on this list I've got on here about shade covers and frost covers and picking out your seeds and your seed starting supplies. One of the good things about seeds this time of year in July, most of the seed companies are running awesome sales because it's the end of the year for them and they're trying to get rid of stuff. So it's a good time to be trying to purchase seeds because a lot of the times they're going on sale right now. Okay, fertilization. Fertilization nation. Let's talk about it for a minute because, in all honesty, I'm laughing and we're having a good time. I see y'all in the chat, y'all having some fun. Um, but fertilization is one of those spots where I see a lot of beginner gardeners. They either overspend, and Todd's gonna get me because I don't need you to overspend on fertilizer. I also don't want you to overthink it or give up on it. So here's the simple of it, right? A good fertilizer, it's got three numbers on it. And I got this right here, this sample that I got. Oh, and this is some fancy stuff, but I guess on the sample, they didn't put the breakdown on here. Oh, shame. Sorry, y'all don't look at that. It's a great product though. But good fertilizers have three numbers on the bag. Those three numbers are what we call NPK, nitrogen, phosphorus, potassium. Nitrogen is what gives you that leafy green growth. When you grow greens and lettuce and even tomatoes, they have tons of leaves, and your pepper plants have tons of leaves. Nitrogen is what helps make that happen. Nitrogen is also what your garden loses the quickest because all your plants are sucking up as much of that as they can get. Phosphorus, that's your root builder. It's also what helps you get flowers and fruit on your plant. You got to have phosphorus in your soil. And then the K is for potassium. And I call that the bodyguard because the potassium is what helps the water and the nutrients go from the roots up the stem of the plant into the fruit. Potassium helps your plant manage disease and handle drought, and it helps you have a strong plant. So that's the potassium. For new gardeners, I always recommend you find a water soluble fertilizer because it's easier to use than some of the other stuff. Now, personally, I like, and I see y'all sharing brands, and I love that. Now, my favorite water soluble fertilizer, I love Fertilone Fish Emulsion. I like the Fox Farm brand, and I like Vital Earth. I love Vital Earth. Vital Earth is out of East Texas, and they make rocking stuff for our gardens. I also love Work Hard Worms here in Marshall. They do worm castings and they give you the products to make worm teas, and those work really well. I use those in my garden, my spring garden, and that was the one water soluble fertilizer I used, and I had so much success. And that family, that couple is right here in Marshall, and they are rocking and rolling with a great product. I also like the Nelson brand of fertilizer products. Now, those are more kind of natural or organic products, and they do a beautiful job. The downside is sometimes they're not as easy to find locally, so you need to plan ahead so that if you have to get online and order something, or if you have to go to Longview, like Jess mentioned, she buys Fox Farms in Longview. You got a plan to be able to do that, at least until we open in January. So you want to get an idea of what you want to use. But here's what I do want to say. I am not the type of gardener who is against gardeners using Miracle Grow. Those little blue crystals, You scoop those crystals into the water. That works, right? And I personally, I prefer more natural fertilizers. I prefer fish fertilizer and worm castings. But Miracle Grow, that stuff is easy to find, it's affordable, and it's a go-to for a lot of gardeners. So I always tell new gardeners, don't let perfect be the enemy of a great garden. It doesn't have to be perfect to be great. You're going to need to fertilize. So I encourage you to use the product that you can consistently get your hands on, because the key is consistent, regular fertilizing. So as you build out your garden plan, one of the things that I need you to add to your calendar, go write it on your calendar or put it in your phone to give you a reminder, but every 1 to 2 weeks, depending on what product you pick, you're going to be out there fertilizing. I use fish fertilizer and I'm out there every week. Winston loves it. He loves the smell of it. Todd hates the smell of it. I love it because it works. But that regular feeding is incredibly important to your garden. I also wanted to take a minute to talk about compost. Now, I am a soil nerd. We have these shirts that we put out when we first announced our business, and they say, God made dirt and dirt don't hurt. And that's a saying that we use in softball, but it also is one that goes for gardening. God made dirt and dirt don't hurt. In gardening, we like to talk about soil, right? And soil is the foundation of your garden, but compost makes that soil even better. Now, when you're picking out a compost, I always tell gardeners, new gardeners specifically, go buy bagged compost. Once you get more advanced, you're going to end up with some sort of compost bin. But good compost, when it's fully finished, it is dark in color and you don't have any big chunks of decomposed stuff that hadn't finished decomposing. Compost also, it should have like an earthy smell, like it should smell earthy, but it shouldn't stink, right? If your compost has a bad smell, it is not ready. And if it's not ready, don't use it on your plants, because if it's not ready and it's still decomposing, what happens is that hot compost, it kind of burns up your plant. My grandmother, and you'll hear some of the more seasoned gardeners talk about, you burnt up your plants with fertilizer, right? Because fertilizer is hot. That's what that's the terminology we use. And what that really means is that the chemicals, right? And that organic matter, right? Soil is alive, right? And because it's alive, it's warm, and you don't want that stuff burning up the roots of your plants. Now, finished compost is the dream. It helps with the clay, right? It helps your garden thrive. Like I said, I have my own compost bin. Ty built it for me, and maybe I'll see if I can get him to teach a class on how to build a compost bin, because that could be fun. But some of the brands I like, I told you I love Vital Earth. Vital Earth compost, chef's kiss. But I also like Black Cow. I like Land and Sea by Espoma. And I like that Coast of Maine brand. Vital Earth is a little easier to get your hands on around here. Black Cow, they usually sell that I'm sure they have some at Lowe's. I believe they might sell it at Walmart also. And then like Land and Sea by Espoma, fantastic. The Fox Farms compost is so good. It's rich and it's fluffy and it works really well. Those cost a bit more, but boy, you will see results from them. So, like I said, you buy the highest quality soil and compost that you can afford, right? Now, I do want to give one tip, because as I work with gardeners to build kitchen gardens, one time I had somebody do something, and I want to give a word of warning, because we're in East Texas and we all have family members or friends of family members or a friend of a friend who owns some livestock. And a lot of the times you'll hear new gardeners and they want to go and get some of that livestock compost, right? They want to go get some of that cow poop and add it to their garden. Well, you need to be a little advanced before you start playing with that. Compost, before it goes in your garden, has to be fully broken down. And fully broken down usually means that it is hit between 115 to 150 degrees for 1 to 2 weeks in a row, right? It's got to be hot for an extended period of time because that's what breaks down the bad bacteria. And I share this with folks because I don't want somebody to end up sick. The person I had hired, not I had hired, she had hired me to work on her garden, and she had added that in there, one of her raised beds, and that raised bed ended up having to just be a compost bin for several weeks because we had to let that cow poo get broken all the way down before we could really use that bed. So that's a word of caution if you're one of the folks that has that idea. And I promise you, it's not a bad idea. It's not a bad idea. The concept makes sense, but you got to know a little bit more about that before you play with that. So, a little bit more about other amendments with compost in your new raised bed or your new garden. You're going to want to till in about 2 to 4 inches of compost. And then every year, you're going to add on another half an inch to an inch, right? So you start out needing more because you're just getting going. And then every year, you're going to add compost. In my garden, I usually add a bag of compost to my raised bed. I add one each time I add one each growing season. Let me finish the sentence, right? So you just top it off with some compost. With the aged manure, the tip that I have here is just a reminder that if you're using aged manure from out of the field, right? Not something that you buy. When you buy it, it's already finished. But if you use aged manure, you need to apply that 60 to 90 days before you harvest, and you're going to want to add 1 to 3 inches. And then the last one with wood chips, you use wood chips and mulch for moisture retention. And wood chips also, they feed the living part of soil, the fungi that's in soil. You're going to want to add 2 to 4 inches of 2 to 4 inches of mulch. You don't want to put it right on the root zone. You want to put it around your plant, not right up to the stem. And then the other thing about wood chips and mulch, don't till that in. That's for the top of your garden. And then on the side, I highlighted worm castings. I am a cheerleader for worm castings. I think I may have said something already about work hard worms here in Marshall. Work hard worms has rockin' worm castings. I know you can order it online, and I think you can go to their shop. I don't know their hours, but look them up online. And then we also have bone meal. And bone meal is awesome because it gives your plants a good boost of phosphorus, and that helps your plants' roots and your plants' fruiting. And then lastly, there is blood meal. And blood meal is like a quick fix of nitrogen for your plants. So those are some just really common amendments that I like to add to the garden. Y'all, I'm sorry about that glitch. I don't know what caused that. That was weird. um, I would be doing that was so weird, y'all. But anyway, I would be doing us a disservice if I didn't talk a little bit about the pest in the garden before we got on to this next section, before we wrap this prep part up. So in East Texas, we have some pretty specific pest challenges. I have included in your course materials this pest and disease guide, and I just did a brain dump of the different pests and the different diseases that we commonly see. As a new gardener, right, one of the things that is important is that you have consistency in your garden and that you're going out and looking at it regularly. And so I made this sheet so that if you see something, you can kind of refer back to it to figure out what's happening. But two things I wanted to talk to y'all about, because you will see these things happening in the garden. One is cabbage worms. I always show the pretty pictures of my garden, but here you can see what those cabbage worms did to my cauliflower. Now the cauliflower fruit, it's still fine. The plant, the food is good. That's still very much so edible. But boy, those cabbage worms ate the leaves of this thing up. So cabbage worms, they're these like bright green little bitty caterpillars, and they love brassicas. They love broccoli, cabbage, cauliflower, and they will go to work on the leaves. And they will work fast. So that's why you got to be inspecting your plant all the time. They hide on the backside of your leaf. So if you see these little green caterpillars, you can pull them off and squish them. And if you get a tougher infestation of them, you can use a product we call BT. I was fixing to try to say the word, and boy, I will mess that word up. So it's on the screen, but there's a product called BT that works really, really well for cabbage worms. And then another one that I wanted to talk about was aphids. I have never seen a garden that didn't have to deal with aphids a little bit. The easiest way to deal with them is just to blast them off with a spray of water. But for a new gardener, what you're looking for, what you'll notice is, especially on your newly transplanted plants, you'll see this kind of sticky residue up the stem and on the leaves, and then you might see the leaves starting to curl, and you'll see these clusters of these little bitty bugs, right? Just spray them off with some water, and if they get really, really bad, you can use insecticidal soap. That's a really safe pesticide. Now, the best secret weapon for dealing with pests in your garden is you have to show up. Like a gardener who checks their garden regularly every few days, you'll catch a problem before it turns into a complete disaster. But if you don't check your garden but once every week, once every 2 weeks, well, the aphids will go from a few to a lot. And the cabbage worms will have ate up everything if you're not out there regularly. But y'all print off or save you a copy of that pest guide because it's really, really helpful. So now we're on to the fun stuff. Raised beds, are they worth the hype? And y'all know my answer is yes. I am a huge fan of raised beds. These are my beds right here, and that's Winston with his cute self in the back. Winston's my golden doodle, and he supervises my whole garden operation. When we open the store up, his official job title is Chief Morale Officer because he sure makes everybody happy. But raised beds are awesome because they give you control over the soil. And we've talked a lot about how like soil is the foundation of a good garden. Now, East Texas clay, you can garden in it and you can garden well in it, but sometimes it's tricky and it's tough and it can get compacted. The good thing about raised beds is you pick the soil, right? Another thing is you can stretch out your growing season. I love metal raised beds because metal raised beds, they run a little warm, right? And so when it's February and it's colder outside, or when it's December and that temperature starts dropping, your bed is a little bit warmer. But I'm an advocate for raised beds for a lot of reasons, but especially for new gardeners, it makes things go a little bit easier for you. Um, when it comes to, I got ahead of myself. Okay. When it comes to designing your raised beds, here are the numbers, right? You want it 4 feet wide. That's a really good sweet spot. They sell them all sorts of sizes online. Those 2 foot wide ones, I think, are just too narrow to plant enough plants. So 4 feet is a really good sweet spot, and 4 foot wide is magic because you can reach to the middle of the raised bed without having to step in it, right? You don't want to be stepping in your raised bed and then getting the soil all compact. You want your raised bed to be 12 inches deep, a foot tall. Most vegetable roots, big vegetables like peppers, tomatoes, broccoli, they need 12 inches of soil for their roots. You can buy raised beds that are taller. They have some that are 2 foot tall and some that are 3 foot tall. Whenever I have one that's taller, and we fill the bottom of it with logs and wood chips, and cardboard, and all of that is fine when you have one of those taller raised beds. But you want to have 12 inches of soil. You can make your raised bed whatever length you want to, but 8 foot is standard. 8 foot works good for irrigation planting, but 8 foot also works good because if you're going to go into Lowe's or the lumber yard and get lumber to build it, 2x8 is your friend. Lumber is kind of pre-cut there, so 8 foot works well. I got listed here the materials that you can build it out of. I like wood ones. I like metal ones. This one on the left-hand side, that's at one of the churches, and I got to help design that garden, and it is just beautiful. But those are wooden raised beds, and then we put these panels, we attached these panels to the top of it because the rabbits were just having a field day in our garden over there. So we put those panels on there and they worked out well. The other picture is of a home garden that I helped build. And I mean, that one is metal. So you can pick your material, but I do want you to avoid railroad ties and avoid treated lumber because those can leach some stuff that's not so good for you. I'm okay with you using railroad ties if you're just doing a flower garden, but don't use those railroad ties on your food. And then the last thing about the raised beds, and this one is important, give yourself plenty of space between the beds. So when Todd and I first built my raised bed garden, we just made the walkway 2 foot. And that's enough space to kind of shimmy through, but it made it hard for me to pull my wagon through there. Give yourself about 3 foot at a minimum. And I like 5 foot because if I got 5 foot, I can pull all kinds of stuff through my walkways. Y'all got it? Y'all liked that part. I see someone saying that they saw some really cool plastic raised beds on sale. I'm not opposed to plastic raised beds at all. I use plastic containers. I have some huge plastic pots that I bought from the pottery sale, and those I'm putting tomatoes in those. So plastic will work just fine, especially if you're a newer gardener. Like I said, with your raised bed, I want you to find you one that will work and get something that's affordable there and then focus in on spending your money on quality soil, right? So you can use things that you've got around the house. I see someone saying they built theirs out of bricks. That's perfectly fine. So next up, we are almost towards the end, y'all. We're making good timing. But here's your cheat sheet of what to grow in East Texas. Now on the left, those are the crops that I recommend to every single person who is gardening for the first time, right? In the fall, greens show out. But you can also do a really rocking salad garden with lettuce mixes by seed. I also tell everyone to plant radishes, cherry tomatoes, and sugar snap peas. You will have easy wins there. And then for the showstoppers listed there, well, they take a little bit more work, but boy, they are absolutely so rewarding. So I see, we're going to talk about garlic, okay? Before I open up the Q&A, we have a few more slides for us to look at. And essentially, each of you have this PowerPoint in your notes. But on these following slides, we break down crop by crop, when to plant them, and what are some varieties that I love and some tips, right? So this first one, it's all about greens. And you seed greens outdoors starting in August through October. And okay, somebody talked about that was mustard greens that Todd was holding. My favorite mustard green to grow is that Florida broadleaf. I wrote lead. That's a spelling error on there, but it's Florida broadleaf. It's the best, right? Another great crop for new gardeners is lettuce. And with lettuce, the main hiccup that I see people struggle with is that they start their lettuce seeds too early, right? So we talked about those seasons. Lettuce is a cool season crop. So you're going to need those temperatures to be dropping once the seeds sprout. You might plant your seeds in August, right? But it's going to take them a little while to sprout. And then as the temperature drops, you'll have more and more success with your lettuces. When it's hot outside, those lettuce seeds will bolt. And lettuce tastes better when you eat the young leaves. The hotter it is, the more bitter it'll taste. As the weather cools off, you get better and better lettuce. Another crop that I wanted to share really briefly about was radishes. Now, radishes, I know I get a lot of people, they're like, I don't like the taste of radishes. Let me tell you something. I don't care whether you like them or not. You should grow radishes because they grow fast. And if you are a new gardener, when you pull those red radishes up out of your garden, you are going to have that moment that's going to get you, it's going to hook you to gardening because it's so cute, it's so awesome, and people have a lot of success with radishes. So certainly pick up you a package of radish seeds. I put a note on here about that watermelon radish. I got those seeds from Mary's Heirloom Seeds, and they were rocking. With peas, peas are a great win. The tip about peas is don't try to transplant them. You're going to have to direct sow them because they do not like to be moved. And with tomatoes, right? Tomatoes are a showstopper vegetable in your fall garden. And I'm going to stop here and talk just for a minute because people that know me, they know that I am a tomato growing queen. If you go to our website, marshallgardencompany.com, and find our tomato guide. I wrote an ebook about tomatoes because tomatoes are my jam, and fall tomatoes taste even better than spring tomatoes, right? But my tomato tip for you all that are new is that you're going to plant those tomatoes really, really deep so that you can have some success. But there are tips here, and then there's even more on the website. I got a free guide on there for you. And then if you need more in depth about the tomatoes, the ebook costs $3.99. And if you really need the ebook and you don't have $3.99, I bet you I'll figure out a way to give you one because you're going to have some success with tomatoes. Up next is the broccoli, and broccoli is one of those fall showstoppers, but broccoli needs some time to mature. So you've got to get that transplanted by the middle of September, right? So it takes 100 days to get the full broccoli crown, and the timing is important, right? My favorite variety is that Green Magic, and you can find the seeds for that one pretty easily. One other tip with broccoli, when you cut off the main crown of your broccoli, leave that plant in the ground for a while and you'll get these side shoots off and you'll get even more broccoli crowns for your family to enjoy. And the next one is carrots. So really quickly, before we go into the Q&A, my biggest tip on carrots, I got two of them. You direct sow carrots. And when you direct sow those carrots and they start sprouting out, you need to be sure to thin them out. You want your carrot plants to have a few inches in between them because if not, they're going to curl up and you're going to have all those weird carrots that you see online. And I always tell new gardeners, it's hard to thin out the plant. I get it because thinning it out means I'm going to take one out and that could have grown and been in care. If you leave them packed in there too tight, they're not going to cooperate with you well. The other tip about carrots, though, is carrots need a full 70 to 80 days to be ready. You will have your carrot seeds and it's growing and you'll have all these green leaves coming out of it. But if you pull it too early, you will have this teeny tiny carrot because they need some time. And then we also talked about garlic. Garlic is a showstopper in Marshall Gardens, and people don't realize how well garlic will grow. And garlic is forgiving and easy. When you buy seed garlic, What you're going to want to do is take those cloves apart. You can leave that I can't think of the word for the peel on it, the dry peel, leave that on there and plant them pointy side up, 6 inches apart. And the only thing you're going to have to do from the time you plant them through June is fertilize them. They need some food so that they'll get big. Now with garlic, you're going to want to use the soft neck varieties in East Texas. The hard neck ones will grow, but they take a little bit more time and they're a little trickier. So stick with the soft neck ones and you will have yummy, yummy garlic. We also do cucumbers. We're going to do some fall cucumbers starting in August. I want you to plant some cucumber seeds through September. Just with your cucumbers, be sure to give them a trellis so that they can grow up. And then with your cucumbers, just remember that they are thirsty and cucumbers want consistent watering. They want a schedule for their watering. That is important for those cucumbers. If you water them sporadically, they will not give you the love that you deserve. And then I think we got one more, and it's pumpkins, right? I always like to get new gardeners to try pumpkins, right? And a lot of people think, Melissa, you're crazy. You can't grow pumpkins here. But the key for success with pumpkins is to grow these small varieties. That's the Jack Be Little pumpkin. And it's just one of those tiny little cute pumpkins that you can't wait to get a picture of your kiddos and your grandbabies holding those pumpkins. You can also have success with the sugar pie pumpkin, and it's a medium-sized pumpkin that you can cook with. With the pumpkins, just know they are space hogs. They are going to grow all over the place. So when you put it in your raised bed, be sure to plant it on the edge so that way you can move those vines so that they can kind of just sprawl over the edge. But pumpkins, they grow really fast. They take up a lot of space, but if you get those seeds in the ground by the first part of August, you'll have some little baby pumpkins come October. And that's all of them. Oh my gosh, we got through it. that is your greatest fall vegetable garden, y'all. We have covered a whole lot of ground. And on this slide, those are some awesome resources for you guys. The Green Thumbs Up Garden Club is a garden club in Marshall. They meet usually at the animal shelter. But boy, that is a good group of friends that you can have to help I don't know, meet your garden crew. And then I also put a few websites that give a whole lot of helpful information for everybody. Before I open it up for question and answer, because gosh, we got through that hour right on time. But before I open it up for a question and answer, I did want to tell everybody thank you so much. I know some of you aren't going to be able to stay on the call during the question and answer, but I have to tell y'all, thank y'all. Todd and I, we are so appreciative for all the folks cheering us on and opening this garden center. And for those of you to take an hour out of your time to talk with me and to chat with each other about how to garden, y'all, that means so much to me. I appreciate you so much. Y'all be sure to don't forget that your class materials, I'll be sure to resend those to y'all in the thank you email I'll send to you. And then I will have the recording of this call available within the next day or so. I'll have that online so that if you need to reference it or if you want to be like, well, what did she say about such and such? I'll have that available to you guys so that you can review it. But for those of you who have to go now, I appreciate y'all. I love y'all. I love the gardens that you're going to build. And y'all take pictures of what you're growing and send them to me because I'd love to see what you have happening. Thank y'all so much. I am going to I'm going to be sure to send y'all a message with some goodies and I appreciate y'all so much. Now, before I open it up for question and answer, y'all, I'm going to stop the recording because I had a couple of people say they got some questions, but they didn't want to be on the video. And I completely get that. So I'm going to stop the recording and then we're going to go into Q&A. And It's a little bit after 1 o'clock. We'll plan on being on for about 30 to 45 minutes, right? And get as many questions as we can. And y'all feel free to stay on as long as you need to, or hop off if you have to. But just to the folks that gotta go now, I appreciate you so much. And y'all, let's get to Q&A. Let me get the chat and all that stuff going.